The massive crystal chamber of the Galactic Council sparkled under the light of 3 suns. 200 alien representatives sat in rising tiers, all staring down at the lone human standing at the center. Ambassador James Miller kept his back straight and his expression calm, though his hands gripped the podium tightly. "You mean to tell us," the head counselor spoke, his blue scales shimmering, "that your species actively tries to avoid war?" The question carried a hint of disbelief. "That's correct," Miller replied. He could see the confusion on their faces, faces that ranged from insectoid to reptilian to shapes that defied Earth's biology. "We consider war a last resort." A laugh echoed through the chamber. "Yet your military spending exceeds that of 15 council worlds combined," another representative pointed out. This one looked almost plant-like, with flowing green tendrils that moved as she spoke. Miller nodded. "Precisely because we understand war's cost." He pressed a button, and holographic images appeared above the chamber. They showed Earth's historical battles, hospitals filled with wounded soldiers, and cities reduced to rubble. The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They weren't used to such direct displays of violence. Most advanced species considered themselves above showing such things. "We maintain strong defenses exactly because we fear war," Miller continued. "We know its horror firsthand. Our history is filled with conflicts that shaped us." The head counselor leaned forward. "But this makes no sense. Species that excel at warfare celebrate it. Species that fear it become peaceful. You humans, you seem to do both. How can you fear something yet be so prepared for it?" Miller walked away from the podium, addressing the council more personally. "Imagine a parent who knows how to fight. They don't enjoy violence. They hope never to use their skills. But they maintain them because they understand that sometimes you must fight to protect what you love." A murmur ran through the chamber. The concept seemed to disturb many of the representatives. Most council species had evolved past physical combat, relying on automated defense systems and AI-driven warfare. The idea of maintaining a personal connection to combat while fearing it was foreign to them. "We have reviewed your application for council membership," the head counselor announced after a brief discussion. "We find your species concerning. You possess the military capability of a Class 3 civilization, but the warfare psychology of a Class 7. This combination has never been recorded before." Miller felt his heart sink. He knew what was coming. Furthermore, a thin, silver-skinned representative added, "Your simultaneous development of weapons alongside peace initiatives suggests a deep psychological instability as a species. We cannot risk introducing such unpredictable elements into the council." "With all due respect," Miller argued, "that instability, as you call it, is wisdom earned through blood and tears. We—" The head counselor raised his hand, cutting Miller off. "The council's decision is final. Earth's application for membership is denied. We recommend a century of further social development before reapplication." As Miller gathered his materials, he caught whispers from the council members. They spoke of humans as primitive, unpredictable, and dangerous. One word kept repeating: barbarians. Little did they know that their comfortable galaxy was about to change. Little did they understand that humanity's unique relationship with war would soon prove to be not a weakness, but their greatest hope for survival. As Miller left the chamber, his communicator buzzed. A message from Earth's Defense Command flashed across the screen. "Unknown ships detected at the edge of Council space. Aggressive patterns. No response to hails." He paused, looking back at the council chamber. They had just rejected humanity for understanding something they didn't want to face. Sometimes peace must be defended with force. The real test was about to begin. 1 month after Earth's rejection from the Galactic Council, the grand meeting chamber felt different. Gone was the peaceful atmosphere, replaced by nervous whispers and worried faces. Emergency signals flashed on multiple screens as representatives hurried to their seats. "The reports are confirmed," announced the head counselor, his blue scales now a pale shade of worry. 3 more border worlds have gone silent. The unknown ships we detected last month belong to a species calling themselves the Ravagers. Thomas Reed, Earth's military advisor, stood in the observers section. Unlike last time, he hadn't been invited to speak, but he watched, taking notes as the council did exactly what Earth's history had taught him they would do. Nothing effective. "We must send a diplomatic mission," suggested one representative, their tentacles waving gently. "Perhaps they can be reasoned with." "The last diplomatic mission never returned," another pointed out. "We lost contact 6 days ago." Reed couldn't stay quiet any longer. He stepped forward, breaking protocol. "Council members, if I may speak." "The council does not recognize," the head counselor began, but Reed continued anyway. "These Ravagers have destroyed 5 worlds in a month. They don't answer calls for peace. They don't take prisoners. Every world they've attacked has gone completely silent." Reed's voice carried across the chamber. "This isn't a diplomatic problem. This is an invasion." Shocked gasps filled the room. The word invasion hadn't been used in council space for over 300 years. "How dare you suggest such a primitive concept?" A silver-skinned representative stood up. "We are civilized beings. We solve problems through discussion, not violence." Reed pulled out a small device and projected images into the air. "These are satellite images from the attacked worlds. Notice the pattern. They're moving in a straight line, following a path." He drew a red line across the star map, a path that leads directly to the council's core worlds. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. "What would you have us do?" the head counselor asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Launch a preemptive strike. Become barbarians like your species." "I would have you learn from our history," Reed replied calmly. "Earth faced similar situations. We learned that evil exists in the universe. Real evil. The kind that sees your desire for peace as weakness. The kind that only understands strength." He walked to the center of the chamber, where Ambassador Miller had stood a month ago. "You call us barbarians because we maintain armies while seeking peace, but we do it because we learned this lesson the hard way. Through 2 world wars and countless smaller conflicts, we learned that peace isn't just the absence of violence. Sometimes peace must be protected. The Council will not be lectured on peace by a species that was killing itself with nuclear weapons less than 200 years ago," the head counselor declared. "We will handle this through proper channels. We will send another diplomatic mission, this time with more representatives." As the council descended into debate about who would go on this mission, Reed's communicator buzzed. The message made his blood run cold. "Ravager fleet just destroyed the diplomatic convoy. No survivors. They're accelerating toward council space." Reed looked up at the arguing council members, then back at his communicator. He sent a short message to Earth Command. "They're not ready. Implement Protocol Dark Dawn." As he left the chamber, Reed remembered an old quote from Earth's history. "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." The council was about to learn why humans never forgot their warrior past, even while working for peace. They were about to learn why preparing for war while praying for peace wasn't a contradiction, it was survival. And based on the reports he was seeing, that lesson would come sooner than anyone expected. The Galactic Council's emergency alarm rang for the first time in 3 centuries. Red lights flashed across the crystal chamber as panicked representatives rushed to their seats. On the main display, 3 council worlds burned. "How did they get past our automated defenses?" the head counselor shouted, his blue scales almost white with fear. "Those systems were supposed to be unbeatable." The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Mary Wilson of Earth's Space Force walked into the chamber, uninvited but unchallenged. No one had the energy to stop her. "Your defenses failed because they were predictable," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The Ravagers studied them, learned their patterns, and simply walked right through them." "Impossible," a plant-like representative argued. Our AI systems adapt to any. A massive explosion rocked the chamber. On the screens, a fourth council world went dark. While you've been debating, Earth has been preparing, Wilson continued. She pressed a button on her tablet, and a new map appeared. We've mobilized our entire fleet. We've also contacted other primitive species you rejected from the council. Turns out we're not the only ones who remember how to fight. The head counselor stood up, shaking. You acted without council permission. This is a violation of. With all respect, Wilson cut him off. We don't have time for permissions. The Ravagers will reach this sector in less than 10 days. Your automated fleets are falling back. Your AI systems are being hacked. You need help. As if to emphasize her point, another emergency signal flashed. A fifth world had gone silent. What? The head counselor swallowed hard. What do you suggest? Wilson's tablet displayed a series of battle plans. Earth leads a coalition of 14 species you considered too primitive for membership. We all maintain traditional military forces, real pilots, real soldiers, people who understand that sometimes you have to fight. The chamber fell silent as images appeared of Earth ships moving into defensive positions. They weren't as sleek or advanced as Council vessels, but they had something the Council had forgotten about. Human crews who could think creatively, who could adapt, who understood battle in their bones. The Ravagers beat your defenses because machines can't feel fear, Wilson explained. They can't understand the enemy's fear either, but we do. We know fear. We respect it. And that's why we'll win. A new alarm blared. The Ravager fleet had accelerated. They would arrive in 7 days, not 10. I don't need your permission to defend Earth, Wilson said firmly. But I do need your cooperation to defend everyone. Your technology combined with our experience is the only way we survive this. The council members looked at each other. Centuries of peace had left them unprepared for this moment, but they could see the truth in the Admiral's words. What do you need from us? The head counselor asked quietly. Access to your defense grids, control of your production facilities, and most importantly, I need you to trust us. Trust that our fear of war is exactly why we're good at it. As Wilson coordinated with council technicians, her communicator buzzed. The coalition fleet was in position. Ships from Earth, Mars, and a dozen other primitive worlds formed a defensive line between the Ravagers and council space. Looking at the battle map, Wilson felt the familiar knot in her stomach. The same fear every human warrior had felt throughout history. But unlike the council, she knew this fear, understood it, would use it. All ships, battle stations, she commanded. The enemy wants to teach the galaxy about war. Let's show them they picked the wrong teachers. The next few days would show the council why humans never forgot how to fight, even while praying they'd never have to. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed a species that hated war but excelled at it. The real battle was about to begin. Commander David Anderson stood before a room full of alien military officers, if you could call them that. Most had never seen real combat. Their worlds had relied on automated systems for so long that warfare was just theory to them. Your first mistake, Anderson said, pointing to the holographic display of their recent defeats, was thinking that better technology always wins wars. He waved his hand, and the display showed the wreckage of advanced council ships. The Ravagers proved that wrong, didn't they? A tall, crystal-like being raised its hand. But our ships had superior weapons. Our eye was more advanced. How did they defeat us? Anderson smiled. The same way humans won battles against superior forces throughout our history. They wanted it more. They adapted faster. And most importantly, they weren't afraid to take losses. The room fell silent. In council space, any military loss was seen as a complete failure. The idea of acceptable casualties was foreign to them. Today, we're going to learn something your civilizations forgot, Anderson continued. It's called guerrilla warfare. Hit and run. Strike where they're weak. Retreat when they're strong. Trade space for time. He brought up new images, showing small, fast ships darting between asteroids. Your automated fleets tried to match the Ravagers head-on. That's why you lost. We're going to teach you to fight smart, not just with superior technology. Over the next few hours, Anderson drilled them in tactics Earth had learned through centuries of warfare. The council officers were surprised to learn that most of these strategies were older than their civilizations. "But this is primitive," protested one officer, their metallic skin gleaming under the lights. "Using terrain for cover, setting ambushes. These are ancient techniques." "Ancient doesn't mean obsolete," Anderson replied. He showed them footage from the latest battle, where Earth ships had used an asteroid field to ambush a Ravager fleet. "The Ravagers expect you to fight like machines. We'll teach you to fight like warriors." The training continued day and night. Anderson watched as the alien officers slowly transformed. They learned to think creatively, to see opportunities where their AIs saw only obstacles. Most importantly, they learned that fear during battle wasn't weakness. It was a tool. "Fear keeps you alive," he explained during a combat simulation. "It sharpens your instincts. The trick isn't to be fearless. The trick is to act despite your fear." A week into the training, alarms blared. A Ravager scout fleet had been detected nearby. The perfect chance for a practical lesson. "Show me what you've learned," Anderson ordered his students. He watched as they coordinated their ships, using the tactics they'd practiced. Simple moves, executed well. The battle was short but decisive. For the first time, a council fleet defeated a Ravager force without taking massive losses. The victory wasn't due to superior technology or AI. It came from officers thinking, adapting, and fighting with both their minds and hearts. Back in the training room, Anderson addressed his tired but proud students. "Today, you fought like humans. Not because you had our technology or our ships, but because you embraced our most important military doctrine. The combination of brain and gut, of fear and courage." The alien officers stood straighter, pride visible even on their non-human faces. They were starting to understand why humanity's relationship with war was so complex. It wasn't about loving combat. It was about respecting it. "Tomorrow, we learn advanced tactics," Anderson announced. "But tonight, we celebrate, because you've learned the most important lesson. The best warriors aren't the ones who feel no fear. They're the ones who know what to do with it." As his students filed out, Anderson checked the latest battle reports. The Ravagers were still advancing, but now they were meeting real resistance. The galaxy was learning to fight back, not with just machines, but with determination and wisdom born of fear. The tide was beginning to turn. The war room deep inside Centauri Prime buzzed with activity. Admiral Wilson stood at the central command table, surrounded by both human and alien officers. The holographic display showed thousands of ships, the largest fleet ever assembled in Council space. "Operation Thunderbolt begins in 6 hours," Wilson announced, her voice carrying across the room. "For the first time, we're not just defending. We're taking the fight to the Ravagers." The display zoomed in on the target, the Ravagers' main supply base. They had captured it from the Council 3 months ago, turning it into their forward operating center. The Council said this attack was impossible. A crystalline officer spoke up. Their calculations showed a 90% chance of total failure. Wilson smiled. "That's because their computers don't understand something humans learned long ago. Sometimes the best strategy is to do what the enemy thinks is impossible." The plan was simple, in a human sort of way. While the main fleet engaged the Ravager forces head-on, smaller strike teams would slip through the chaos. Their target, the base's main reactor. "Remember your training," Wilson said. "Fight smart. Stay flexible. Trust your instincts as much as your instruments. Most importantly, remember why we fight." As the fleet moved into position, Wilson thought about how much had changed. The Council species had learned to combine their advanced technology with human combat wisdom. Their ships now had real crews working alongside the AI systems, making decisions that computers alone could never make. The first shots were fired at exactly 600 hours. The space around Centauri Prime lit up with weapons fire. The Ravagers responded exactly as expected. They moved to crush what they saw as a foolish frontal assault. "They're taking the bait," Wilson reported. "All strike teams, execute your runs, just like we practiced." What followed was pure chaos, exactly as planned. While the Ravagers focused on the main battle, small, fast ships darted through their lines. Some were destroyed, but others made it through, each loss hurting but serving the greater strategy. Strike Team Alpha, in position. Strike Team Delta, target acquired. Strike Team Echo, starting our run. The radio crackled with reports as the teams reached their positions. Everything hinged on timing now. If they didn't hit their targets simultaneously, the whole plan would fail. "All teams," Wilson commanded, "execute on my mark." She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar fear in her stomach. The same fear that had kept humanity sharp through countless battles. 3, 2, 1, mark. Multiple explosions bloomed across the Ravager base. Primary reactors, defense systems, and command centers, all destroyed in perfect synchronization. The Ravager fleet, caught between the main attack and the exploding base, fell into disarray. "All ships, full attack," Wilson ordered. "Don't let them regroup." The battle that followed would be studied for generations. Council ships, guided by crews who now understood both fear and courage, struck with precision and power. The Ravager fleet, for the first time, faced an enemy that combined advanced technology with the unpredictability of human warfare. 3 hours later, it was over. The Ravager base was destroyed. Their fleet was in ruins, and the combined human council force had achieved what the computers had said was impossible. In the aftermath, Wilson walked through the war room, stopping at each station to thank her crews, human and alien alike. They had all learned from each other. The council species had learned that feeling fear didn't make you weak, and humans had shown that understanding war didn't mean loving it. "Admiral," a young council officer approached her. "The Ravager survivors, they're requesting terms of surrender." Wilson nodded. This was another human lesson the galaxy had learned: how to win without becoming as cruel as your enemy. "Tell them we accept their surrender," she said, "and send word to all fleets. Operation Thunderbolt was a success. The counterattack has begun." The war wasn't over, but something had changed forever. The galaxy had learned that true strength wasn't in fearless machines or perfect calculations. It was in understanding fear, respecting it, and fighting anyway. The tide hadn't just turned, it had become a tsunami. The peace conference room on Earth looked nothing like the crystal chamber of the Galactic Council. It was simple, practical, with wooden tables and comfortable chairs. Ambassador Miller stood by the window, watching the Ravager delegation approach the building. "Are you sure about this location?" the head counselor asked, his blue scales reflecting the morning sunlight. "Hosting peace talks on Earth seems unusual." "The Ravagers requested it specifically," Miller replied. "They want to understand their enemy. Particularly, they want to understand how we beat them." The Ravager leaders entered the room. They were tall, armored beings with sharp features and dark eyes. Their leader, Supreme Commander Kraz, looked around the room with obvious curiosity. "No weapons scanners?" Kraz asked. "No force fields? You trust us this much?" Miller shook his head. "We trust you exactly as much as you deserve, which is very little. But every guard in this building is human. Living, thinking, adapting humans. You've learned how that works out." The message was clear. Any treachery would be met with the same creative fury that had defeated their fleets. The Ravagers nodded in understanding. "Let's begin," Miller said, taking his seat. "Your unconditional surrender has been accepted. Now we discuss the terms of peace." The negotiations lasted for hours. The council representatives watched in amazement as Miller handled the talks. He was firm but not cruel, strong but not vengeful. It was a balance they hadn't thought possible. Your worlds will remain independent, Miller explained to the Ravagers, but under supervision. Your military will be disbanded, but you'll be allowed defensive forces, with human advisors. You're not destroying us. Kraz seemed surprised. After what we did to the Council worlds. Destruction is easy, Miller replied. Building peace is harder. We learned that lesson centuries ago. The goal isn't to destroy you, but to help you change. The head counselor interrupted. The Ravagers destroyed 5 of our worlds. They showed no mercy. Why should we? Because that's the difference between justice and revenge, Miller cut in. We beat them because we understand war better than they do. Now we'll make peace because we understand that better too. As the terms were finalized, Miller noticed something interesting. The Ravagers showed the same respect to him that they'd shown to Admiral Wilson on the battlefield. They had expected either weakness or cruelty, but found something else. Strength tempered by wisdom. There's one more thing, Miller added at the end. We want your historians to record everything, every detail of this war. Future generations need to understand what happened here. You want us to remember our defeat? Kraz asked. We want you to remember why you were defeated, Miller corrected. Not by superior technology or numbers, but by a species that hates war enough to be good at it. A species that values peace enough to fight for it. The peace treaty was signed as the sun set. The council representatives still seemed confused by the moderate terms, but the Ravagers understood. They had learned the hard way why humans were different. Later that evening, Miller stood with the head counselor in the observation deck, watching ships from all 3 civilizations moving peacefully through Earth's orbit. I think I finally understand, the head counselor said quietly. When we first met, we thought your fear of war was weakness. Now I see it was wisdom all along. Miller nodded. The galaxy's changing. The council needs to change with it. There's a human saying, those who desire peace must prepare for war. And those who understand war best are often the ones who want peace most, the head counselor finished, showing he had learned his lesson well. As they watched the ships above, Miller thought about how far they'd all come. The council had learned to balance wisdom with strength. The Ravagers had learned the cost of unchecked aggression. And humanity had proved that understanding war didn't make you warlike. It made you value peace even more. The stars seemed brighter that night, shining on a galaxy forever changed by a species that feared war enough to master it. 1 year after the peace treaty, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The crystal walls remained, but now Earth's flag stood prominently among the others. More surprisingly, humans and other previously rejected primitive species sat among the council members. Commander Anderson, now General Anderson, stood at the same podium where Ambassador Miller had once been rejected. But this time, the council listened with respect as he presented Earth's new defense protocols. The galaxy has changed, Anderson began. We learned that peace isn't just the absence of war. It's the wisdom to prevent it, the strength to fight it when necessary, and the courage to end it properly. The chamber, once filled with beings who looked down on humans, now nodded in agreement. Many of them had fought alongside humans during the war. They had learned what Earth knew all along, that understanding war didn't make you violent. It made you appreciate peace more deeply. Our first class of combined military graduates is ready, Anderson announced. Council species training alongside humans, learning not just how to fight, but when and why. On the main display, images showed the new military academy on Mars. Young officers from 100 worlds trained together, combining advanced technology with human combat wisdom. But more importantly, they learned the balance between strength and restraint. The Ravagers have completed their first year of supervised peace, Anderson continued. Their worlds are rebuilding. Their children are learning new ways. And most importantly, they understand why they lost. A Ravager representative, now part of the Council's Peace Committee, stood up. We thought humans were weak because they feared war, he admitted. We were wrong. They feared it because they understood it better than anyone. The head counselor, his blue scales now showing signs of age, addressed the chamber. 1 year ago, we faced extinction because we forgot something humans never did, that the galaxy isn't always kind. That peace must sometimes be defended. That feeling fear doesn't make you weak, it makes you wise. Anderson brought up new images, Earth ships patrolling alongside Council vessels, joint training exercises, diplomatic missions protected by combined forces. This is the new face of galactic peace, he said. Not perfect, not without problems, but stronger because we understand both its cost and its value. The Council had changed its membership criteria. They no longer rejected species for maintaining military forces or showing signs of primitive warrior culture. Instead, they looked for balance, the ability to be strong without being cruel, peaceful without being naive. Earth's greatest contribution wasn't our military strategy, Anderson concluded. It was teaching the galaxy that being prepared for war doesn't mean you want it, that understanding conflict doesn't make you violent, that the species who fear war most are often the ones who handle it best. As if to emphasize his point, a group of young officers, human, council, and even Ravager, entered the chamber. They represented the first graduating class of the new combined defense force. They stood tall, confident but not arrogant, strong but not aggressive. "This is our future," Anderson said, gesturing to the graduates. "Not perfect peace. We're not that naive. But informed peace, protected peace, peace maintained by those who understand its cost." The chamber erupted in approval. The council members, once so certain of their superiority, had learned humanity's most important lesson. True wisdom comes from understanding both war and peace, strength and restraint, fear and courage. Later that day, Anderson stood with Miller in the observation dome, watching ships from all species moving through council space. "Did you ever think they'd understand?" Anderson asked. Miller smiled. "They had to. The galaxy's too big and too dangerous for naive peace. Sometimes it takes a species that fears war to teach others how to maintain peace." Above them, the stars shone on a changed galaxy. A galaxy that had learned from humanity that preparing for war while praying for peace wasn't a contradiction. It was wisdom.